Over. Okay, we're live.
Hello and welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser. And with me, as always, the man who completes me.
Phil me and Perich. Don't tell your
That's
wife.
him. Yeah, no. So the man who completes me.
Okay.
You gotta have
friends.
You gotta have many people need things to complete them, and not one person can complete any person entirely. And today, the greatest day of my life, we have only my second interview of a famous person, but honestly, one I've been dreaming about for years. The writer of the 21st, this is the 21st century, yes, of the 21st century, Mr. David F. Walker. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. If this is like the one of the best days of your life, I feel bad. Like you're in for a letdown, but I'll do my best to make it work.
He's the biggest fan of your work, and I mean he's putting you up there. I mean he's married, he has 2 kids, and it's like he's still like the greatest day of my life.
Yeah, you know what? I like my kids a lot, and my wife is wonderful, but you know, they don't get to write Tilda Johnson. So
there you go. Okay, well, okay. Now I understand it. Now I understand where you're coming from. You're a Tilda fan. I get it now.
Oh, Tilda is honest. Let me tell you something about my fan.
He's in love with Tilda Johnson from like since his childhood.
Like most young men who fell in love with Tilda Johnson, I actually never read a book with Tilda Johnson in it. I just read her Handbook to the Marvel Universe entry, and of course fell in love with her.
In the bikini.
Leather bikini. I know. As many
leather bikinis are very impressionable to young men. So I can't.
Yes.
I've been there.
But then you bring her in, and she is just such a phenomenal character. First in Nighthawk and then in Occupy, and honestly, she was more impressive to me than Nighthawk. I'll be honest with you.
No, I agree with you on that. There's no denying that.
She was just a great character, and I'm so glad you brought her back. And I personally, maybe you don't believe this, but I think the entire reason she's in Luke Cage next year is because you made her such a character in this, and for that I am grateful.
Well, thank you. Those are the sort of things you don't like to think about too much, because you're like, okay, she was cool enough to be on the Luke Cage show, and I think she's in the Black Panther movie, so that would make her the only Marvel character I think that has sort of 2 versions in 2 different iterations at the same time.
Yeah.
But yet I can't seem to convince anyone to let me do even a Tilda miniseries, which is kind of frustrating.
Yeah, that's what we wanted. That's what we want. Tilda Johnson as the new Nighthawk.
Well, yeah. Yes, I mean, honestly,
and I'd love to write that book.
Well, you let the powers that be know that they've already sold at least 2 copies. So
yeah. I think that's their concern, is that it might only be 2 copies. So, well, 3 if my mom would buy it, so that would be 3.
But with the Tilda Johnson character, and I mean, you're writing Luke Cage now. Do you communicate at all with anyone from Netflix, or?
No. Like socially, and I don't know if Cheo Coker is working on the show this season or not. I haven't actually paid attention to who's involved with it, but I knew Cheo's work before season 1, and we sort of we used to run in some similar social circles, so we've never met in person, but we've emailed back and forth a bunch of times, and but sort of laid low and haven't really talked to him in a couple months. I was trying to get him together for a panel we did. I can't even remember. Maybe it was WonderCon or Emerald City or something like that, and it just didn't work out.
But yeah, because I just didn't know if they just like the Netflix, if they sent you any communications like, you can do this in the comics, but don't do this. We want to, don't have Luke Cage in an eye patch every issue. We want him to look like the guy from the TV show or something.
I'm sure those memos go out, but they go to people who get paid more than me, and then there's sort of a trickle down of, I don't know what you would call it. I'll get these cryptic notes once in a while, and I figure, oh, that must be from someone higher up the food chain than me.
Like they communicate with your editor or something, and he gets a hold of you or something,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Phil does have the right to stop me if I get too nerdy at you. This could be a problem for me. So I do want to talk for a minute about the Revelator.
Revelator,
The Revelator. Yeah. Thank you. I only read it, so I don't know how it's pronounced. The Revelator.
That's okay. I didn't know I was mispronouncing. Well, I still call it Kunlun, but it's Kunlun, and so I've been mispronouncing that for 40-something years. So
I think we all have, honestly.
Yeah. There's the people who call them Magneto, and it turns, and I was a Magneto guy, but me and my best friend argued when we were in 5th grade. Is it Magneto or is it Magneto? And I was like, it's Magneto, and he was like, no, it's Magneto, and it took the movie coming out to prove me right.
Well, actually, yes, and you know what? I actually learned that before the movie because I had found out later that a Magneto is an actual thing. That there is actually, it's like a thing. So there is a thing called a Magneto, and that's why he's called Magneto. Now, so this is my question with regard to the Revelator. Did you have in your mind when you created this character an origin as to who he was, or was he always meant to be, this character that you were never really supposed to know who he was? He was always supposed to be this sort of man without a face.
It's a combination.
Because I had my own theories.
Okay, it's a combination of the two. So I will reveal who the Revelator was supposed to be from the very beginning. This was all coming on the heels of the last Secret Wars story, in which all these characters were displaced from their own realities and dropped into this new reality, which I believe was the Marvel 616, but I get confused about that sort of stuff. So my whole thing was that the guy who was Nighthawk, Kyle, they kept changing his name on me. It was Kyle Raymond or something. I can't remember, to be honest with you.
Kyle Richmond, I believe, is the
It was originally Kyle Richmond, and then they changed his name to Raymond Kane for some reason. I don't know. But my whole theory was that on the Earth that he found himself, the Revelator was him. That they were actually the same guy, and he was, he had the same, almost the exact same origin, but instead of becoming Nighthawk, he became Revelator, and that was the original plan. And I was told time and time again, this is going to be too confusing, that the readers won't get it. And so I just sort of went the opposite direction, which Revelator had no origin. His face was always draped in the shadows. And I was like, let's see if one or two readers arrive at that same conclusion. And I'll confess this now. I had secretly told Ramon, I was like, don't tell anybody this, but try to draw, when you're drawing the Revelator in shadows, try to make it look like as much like Nighthawk as humanly possible without it being totally obvious. And I think he just kind of ignored that email, because I think he didn't want to get in trouble with editorial, but that was the plan.
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you, editorial was wrong. I totally got it. That was I was well. We used to do a show called the Marvel Roundup, where we reviewed all our comics for the week, and you were so often my pick of the week. And I had predicted that, and I knew that was what you were going for, and so I'm so excited to actually have my crazy fan theory be validated.
Your
See, I told
confirmation.
you, greatest day of my life. What fan ever gets their crazy fan theory validated? Perfect.
I'm happy that that it worked out for you, and yeah, I wish we could have done that. I think it would have been there was in the 80s, and I'm not going to lie, there was. I was inspired by this Batman issue from the 80s that I honestly, I can't tell you the number, but it was drawn by Mike Golden, and it was one of my favorite comics, and they introduced a character called the Wraith, who they brought back in the last few years, like John Layman brought him back. But the premise with the Wraith was that his parents were killed by cops, the exact same moment that Bruce Wayne's parents were killed by the guy in the alley, Joe Chill. And so Bruce Wayne grows up to be Batman, and this other guy grows up to be the Wraith. And they were, two sides of the same coin. And so that's what really inspired me. But I really thought, like, okay, what if we just do this thing where they're actually essentially the same person. But, that is the case. So congratulations, you get the whatever prize there is for that.
Got the no prize.
Nope.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were sitting here talking before you came on. I mean, yeah, everyone listening, I mean, this guy's the real deal, the fan just like us, because I think I was reading somewhere, was Luke Cage the first book you read, or one of the first books you read, and now you're writing Luke Cage?
I was reading comics, but I got my first issue of Luke Cage back in 1976. Let's see, if it was summer of 76. My math skills are bad, but I would have been like 7, I think, at the time when I got my first issue of Luke Cage.
But I mean, how great is that? That's like one of the first characters you read, and now you get to write his adventures every month.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's I got my cousin and I bought that comic together. We had to share it because there was only one. He ended up keeping it, but pretty like every month when an issue of Luke Cage comes out and when an issue of Power Man and Iron Fist came out before that, on that day, that Wednesday, I get a text from my cousin and he's like, "You're writing Luke Cage, you're writing Power Man and Iron Fist," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know, it's kind of weird," and his life is no less. I think his life is far more interesting than mine, and so we kind of go back and forth, and he'll drop these little pearls, like. The other day, he sent me a text message, and it was about he was working with Robert Kirkman, and his whole thing was like, Robert Kirkman knows who you are. This is so cool. And I'm like, you were working with Robert Kirkman. So we both kind of go through that thing.
Now, I do want to get into another question, building on Nighthawk, and spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the phenomenal Occupy Avengers series yet.
How could you not?
You made a very bold choice in the death of Nighthawk and having it even just be sort of an aside, his death. And, part of me wonders, was that because I only have so many pages and I got to get Tilda into the suit? or was there something deeper you wanted to say about violence and death of, anonymous men of color?
It was a combination of the two. So originally, there was the hope that Nighthawk was going to run beyond 6 issues. Mm-hmm. And if that was the case, my plan had been to incapacitate him sometime early on in the second arc, and Tilda was going to take over the mantle of Nighthawk for a while, and then he would come back. And then it would be, then I was going to try to convince them to do a series called Nighthawks. And it was going to be sort of like, Nighthawk and Tilda and maybe 2 or 3 other people. And they have this almost, vigilante crew. But then the book got canceled. And there was talk after, because all the Squadron Supreme books were canceled right around the same time. Squadron Supreme, Hyperion, and Nighthawk. And so there was this talk of doing a series that like a mini series called like The Death of the Squadron Supreme, and the whole thing was, and it was a very short talk, and I was like, and during the conversation it was like, well, how would we kill off each individual member? And I was like, the to me the only acceptable death for Nighthawk would be a totally pointless death. It would have to be something where he was out of costume, that it would be seemingly, you know, it wouldn't be a very heroic death. And no one could agree to that. And then no one could agree to anything. And then the Death of the Squadron Supreme just sort of quickly fizzled. And then Occupy Avengers came up. We were, you know, we were planning all sorts of stuff. And Tom Brevoort asked me, you know, would you have any, we had already put Tilda on the team, and he asked me, would you have any objections to putting Nighthawk on the team? And I said, how about if we have Nighthawk be a recurring character, but he's not an actual team member? And Tom agreed to that. And so we had planned out, I was told, you know, these are the number of issues to plan for. This is what they always tell you. You know, it doesn't matter what publisher you're at. Plan for this number of issues. And then you plan for that. But if the sales don't work out, there's a chance you'll get canceled prematurely, which is what happened with Occupy. And so a total of 14 issues. And that was based on a bunch of conversations I'd had with editorial. And so the plan was that issues, I want to say it was 12 through 14. So it was going to be 12, 13, and 14, a 3-issue arc, was going to be the death of Nighthawk and Tilda becoming Nighthawk. And then, you know, we would hit issue 14. That would be presumably right around the end of Occupy Avengers, because they would inevitably, most titles don't last past 14 issues. And knowing that there was a new Avengers movie coming out next year, it's like, I knew they were going to relaunch everything, even though no one has said that out loud. And so that was going to be the plan. The plan was going to be to have much more time spent with the death of Nighthawk. It was never supposed to be part of the Secret Empire tie-in or anything. And then word came, yep, the book's canceled at issue number 9. And I was like, okay, like, I have to get Tilda in that suit. I have to, this was something I've been planning on doing as part of this, the redemption of Tilda Johnson since the very beginning of Nighthawk. And so I did that. It was, I you know, talked to editorial, and they were like, sure, go ahead and do it. And as with everything, you never expect people to react that way. It's like, our numbers were pretty low. So it was like, I felt like, do people really care about Occupy Avengers? And my Nighthawk numbers were even lower. So I was sort of like, they really don't care about Nighthawk. And lo and behold, there were people that really cared about Nighthawk, and I got chewed up and spit out by them. And, you know, whether it was deservedly so or not. And I seldom engage with people online about this sort of stuff, but there were a lot of people who were like, you know, felt like I did it on a whim. And I was like, no, I was really trying to make a statement, but you know, in hindsight, I probably should have time and space, you know, more pages to make the statement that I really wanted to make. But I still stand by what I did, you know, and because I think that ultimately Tilda's a more interesting character than whether he's Raymond Kane or Kyle Richmond, whatever you want to call him. She's a far more interesting character.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree. I did like the character a lot. One other character in Occupy that, honestly, for me, was one of these characters that I just loved, which was Red Wolf. And I have to ask you this question, because this is just a total... Did you ever read the What If Conan the Barbarian was trapped in the 21st century book?
Oh, God, no? Yeah, I read it. I still have a copy of it, but I don't remember it. There was two. There was one, and then they did a sequel to it. There was What If He Stayed? Yeah. So okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because there's this quality. Because the whole time I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh, this is so the one where he stays, you know, and he sort of has to make do with being in this world, and he's like, well, English is no harder to learn than Sumerian, and he eventually puts himself up, he gets a guild of thieves together, and he starts running his own gang. And what I loved about it, because they do have him fight Captain America, and it's just this idea of Conan being this natural super soldier kind of character. And I with Red Wolf throughout this, that he's like this guy who is just naturally gifted in the way that a guy like Captain America is, and that he's also coming from this perspective that is, a completely different view of the world that most people would have. I mean, one of the jokes I often made when they did do the Secret Empire story is like, I'm just waiting for Red Wolf to say, what, you didn't know he was a fascist? The guy he's dressed as an American flag. You have an idea what I've done? It's like to me, he would be like the one guy who wouldn't be surprised by that. It's like, oh yeah, no, I saw that coming.
This makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Oh, go on.
No, please. This is your interview, not mine.
No, it's funny because I wasn't thinking about that Conan the Barbarian what if, even though on a nerdy side note, those are like of what if that are the hardest to find because Marvel can't reprint them, right? So
yeah.
Second one, I don't have the first one, and whenever I'm at like whether it's one of those little comic shows where they have the long bins or whatever, that's the other one I'm always looking for, because I remember it from my childhood. But interestingly enough, I hadn't even thought about that when I brought Red Wolf into the team. But I was thinking a lot about Captain America and the notion that Captain America is this man out of time, and I think they really did an amazing job with it in the films, just sort of distilling the fact that here's this guy who's from another era, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to play with that with Red Wolf. Only, and I said early on, I said Red Wolf is, he's not going to speak in that sort of stereotypical broken English.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to talk differently than the other characters will. Number one weapon is going to be his smartphone, and he's and I was like, he's going to constantly be looking things up, because if I was a guy who was magically transported from like the 1870s to 2016 or whatever, like the first thing I would do is like, okay, I'm getting me one of these things that has the power of the ages in it. And so that was the big thing that I wanted to do, and again, editorial was really cool with it, and it actually allowed me to make Red Wolf, in a lot of ways he's actually smarter than everybody else in the room, because he thought to do this, like I never got into why he thought to do it, but just the fact that he did. And, and just, it's funny. It's in the middle of a fight with a bunch of Skrulls, and he's like, oh, that's a Skrull. And, Clint is like, yeah, of course it's a Skrull, but how is Red Wolf going to know this unless he, looks it up on Google, even though it's the middle of a fight?
And the Dungstown storyline was one of my favorites in many ways. And again, this is just going to give you just how deep of a nerd I am. It kind of, I think it's Fantastic Four number 2 or 3 when they first encounter the Skrulls, and they have this what is kind of a controversial scene, very controversial scene where they hypnotize the Skrulls, turn them into cows, and one of the Skrulls makes this statement to Reed Richards, which is that that's fine. Change us into anything you want. We want to be anything other than being a Skrull. And of course, there is this idea of self-loathing in there that people might imagine. But I kind of felt that you kind of, in this idea of Skrulls who don't want to be warriors. They don't want to fight this eternal war for no reason. That, to me, it kind of made that idea of these guys who said, I'd rather be a cow than fight another pointless war for the Empire. Because, who would want that? Because it's, as I've always said, the thing about things in the future is that when you live in this world that's kind of beyond want, you can replicate things, and you have faster than light travel, and you can do all these things. What is the point of war? What is the point of anything? And I think all these cultures get, and you see this in Star Trek, you go to this planet and everyone everyone on Klingon or Kronos is a warrior, and everyone on Ferenginar is a merchant, because they need a reason to exist. And people on Earth are all explorers, because what are we going to do? We have no purpose except to find a purpose. And, well, we were explorers, we'll still explore. We were warriors, we'll just make more war. And I do feel that kind of obsession could grate on a person, and I really love the way that you handled those Skrulls in Dunkstown. And honestly, I hope that Dunkstown continues in the Marvel universe. I can't wait to go back to Dunkstown someday and see how the Skrulls are all doing.
Yeah, no, it was that was my, I wanted to do that. That was the first story I wanted to do, actually, in Occupy Avengers. And then there was, I can't remember editorially why we decided to put that a little later. It makes sense now to put it a little later, because it was like, it allowed me a chance to assemble more of the team. But yeah, I just was into the idea, you know, that not every, like you're talking about, like on Star Trek, like not every Klingon is going to be a warrior. Somebody has to run the grocery store, right? You know, on the or all the outlying planets of the Klingon Empire, like somebody builds houses, right? You know, somebody they have to have plumbers, they have to have whatever. With the Ferengi, same thing with everything, and even as a kid, that always sort of bothered me. Like, I remember watching classic episodes of Star Trek, and I was always like, how come these planets they visit don't have grocery stores, you know, or they don't have that sort of thing? And I just thought it'd be really interesting to play with the Skrulls. I think in this, especially in this era, in which we oversimplify the us versus them. These are the enemy. These are the bad people. And and as we're talking, I hadn't thought about it, but there was an episode of either Deep Space Nine or Next Generation, I can't remember which, where Worf goes to this planet looking for, he thinks his father may have survived the massacre at Kittimer, and he finds this colony, and it's like a colony of Romulans and Klingons, and you know, they've married and they've had kids, and I hadn't thought about that till just this very minute, but it was like, that was an episode that I thought was pretty interesting, because it was like, it gave this notion that there's more complexity to the Romulans and the Klingons, and they might fall in love with each other, you know, and so that's something that I like to explore, is this notion that the people, you know, not every hero, you know, heroes are flawed, and not every villain is totally evil, and that's what I want to do with you know, with the Dunkstown storyline, and I think people were waiting for the town to turn out to be a bunch of evil people, and I was like, no, they're just regular, you know, Skrulls who are just trying to get their act together and live life in peace and harmony.
All right, and since we're talking about this storyline, and Charlie, you'll kick yourself if we don't bring up this character. Another one of your favorite characters from Occupy, Wheels Walensky, Mr. Fantastic.
Yes, Mr. Fantastic, which I was so mad you never actually called him Mr. Fantastic in the series. Because you refer to the van as Fantastic like 4 times, and then he turns into the automaton. And I was like, it's Mr. Fantastic! And I think, and to me, Mr. Fantastic, he will always be Mr. Fantastic. I hope someone else coins that term sometime in a book so that it can actually be official. But I thought Mr. Fantastic was a great name for what he becomes when he and the van merge. And yeah, I love that character, and I love that.
Well, it's you know, it's interesting because there's these things that happen when your book gets canceled early, and so one of the things was we were going to get into the fact that the van was actually sentient, and that it hated Clint, which is, so it goes back to an earlier issue where like the stereo wouldn't work and nothing, because it actually didn't like Clint as a person, but that it's in love with Wheels, and there was going to be a whole story. It was probably just going to be a single issue in which Wheels is dealing with the fact that this van is actually in love with him, and that it suddenly becomes really creepy when they bond together. You know, they're like, maybe the van is getting a little bit more out of this than we've realized, and it just never happened.
Oh.
And Wheels was one of those characters that I remembered from the 80s in Wolfpack, and I was just like, yeah, let's do something with him. Like I was determined to try to find some really obscure characters for this team, and it was like 90% of the people who read Occupy were like, who the hell is Wheels Walensky? And then the other 10% were like, oh my God, it's Wheels from Wolfpack. And Diego Comic-Con earlier this year, and I ran into Ron Wilson, the artist Ron Wilson, who was co-creator of Wolfpack with Larry Hama. And, I introduced myself, and he was like, brought Wheels back. And I was like, and it was one of those moments where, because I was having a super nerd moment just talking to Ron Wilson. And then the fact that he knew that I had brought this character that he had co-created back, sort of, I turned into a giddy little, as like in third grade or something like that.
Very cool. Yeah, I know how you feel, because that's how I feel right now. I do gotta say, you did the Butch Cassidy Sundance Kid ending for Occupy, and in your mind, did it, and you don't have to answer this if you want, but in your mind, does everyone get out of there? I mean, when you do
everyone gets out. I didn't want to have a super hardcore ending. I knew I didn't want it to end on a, I was a little disgruntled, to be 100% honest with you, that we were ending at issue 9, and because we were tied into Secret Empire, like, we had to do all this stuff. It was in fact, we were supposed to, the Secret Empire tie-in was supposed to be 3 issues, but it was only 2. And so there was so much stuff that I wasn't able to do. And I just thought to myself, okay, what's a somewhat cryptic ending that I'm not going to kill off any of the characters, because they all mean too much to each other. And I'm especially not going to kill off anybody because Clint's not there. And I felt like, as a member of the team, Clint needed to be there and be part of it. But I had plans for even the Fireheart cousins, Frank and Silas, who originally were only supposed to be in those first 2 issues. And then there was so much fan response to them that I was like, okay, I'm going to bring them back as soon as I can. And Secret Empire proved perfect opportunity to bring them back. And I was still figuring out what to do with them. What I didn't realize at the time that I created those 2 characters was that there's a character in the Marvel Universe called Puma.
Yes.
And his last name is Fireheart as well. And so I was like, if you look in the background, you see Puma in the Secret Empire storyline. And I because we got the run got cut short prematurely, I didn't go there, but there was a whole like side story, subplot, in which we find out that he's actually their long lost uncle. And so the Fireheart cousins are related to Puma. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a really fun thing to do. And it just was like, at the last minute, it was like, oh, we only have 3 issues for Secret Empire, or 2 instead of 3. I'm not going to be able to do this. It's just not going to work. And, but there's all these characters. Tilda is one I'd like to revisit. And because I'd especially like to revisit her relationship with Red Wolf, because in my mind, they survived the onslaught at the end of Occupy number 9. And the next time we see them, they're either in a hard, very strong relationship, or the relationship has ended, but they've had that relationship. And now it's like, they've gone their separate ways, but they're still really tight and really close. And it's Red Wolf's got to do his thing. Tilda's got to do her thing. And I wanted to, continue to explore the Fireheart cousins. And, I think my, I don't know if it's a shortcoming or not, but I think one of the problems I have when I'm thinking of ideas for Marvel is that I'm really interested in these obscure characters, and they mean so much to me, and they mean a lot to a small percentage of readers. not enough to carry a book, you know. And it's the same thing with Power Man and Iron Fist when Sanford and I created Signor Magico, which of course I'm not even pronouncing it properly. It's Signor Magico. But it was like, there's like 15 people that love that character so much. And it's like, I could easily write a mini series or a 2-issue story arc based on him and his origins. But, you know, from a standpoint of sales, nobody at Marvel thinks that that's going to sell well. So it's probably never going to happen.
David, that's a bunch of fiddle faddle.
Yeah, exactly.
As Luke Cage said in Power Man and Iron.
And one thing I really do want to, because we don't want to keep you all day, although I could keep you all day.
Yeah.
I want to talk about
Bitterroot. I can't work all day.
Yeah, I need to make some more issues.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about Bitterroot. It's already on my pull list. I'm very excited about this book. And it's set in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, and I want to get your. First off, I'd love for you to just talk about the book. Let us know what we can expect on it, and I kind of want to know, you know, one of the things that I think, and of course, it's a monster hunter book. At a time when monsters were very real and everywhere, I would love to hear your thoughts on, you know, what kind of monsters are we going to see? How tied are they going to be to real world monsters who were around at the time? And you know, are we talking werewolves or are we talking eldritch horrors?
We are talking, and I'm trying to think how much to talk about without giving away, without spoilers or anything.
Okay,
like that. We came up with the idea that initially it was werewolves and vampires and zombies, and I was the one on the creative team that said, you know, I don't need to read another book about werewolves, vampires, and zombies. I said, let's have monsters that can exist in different, and they don't all look the same, but they're all the product of the same thing, and that same thing has a different name based on different cultures and different religions, but it's essentially, whether you want to call it strife or hatred or war, or you want to call it the devil, or you want to call it Lucifer, or whatever. It's all these things that exist in different cultures that are the things that pit other human beings against each other. It's all those negative things. But what we've done is manifest it into something that can physically transform another human being. And so it's essentially a disease, and we're treating like hate and racism and warfare as a disease. And in this world that we've created, there's essentially two types of monster hunters. There's the people that cure whoever has this disease, and then there's the people that believe you have to kill whoever has this disease. But if you're killing, then you're actually doing the thing that turns people into monsters, right? So that's something that will be explored a little later on as the story goes forward. But yeah, you know, it's set during the Harlem Renaissance, which was right after World War I. It was coming right off the heels of the summer of 1919, which, if you study American history, was the Red Summer, and it was a summer of like several dozen race riots. I'd have to look up the number, but from like May to October, there was race riots all over the country, and they weren't really race riots. They were, it was essentially, in most cities, it was mobs of, like, whether it was members of the Ku Klux Klan or just racists going through and destroying entire communities, and in some cases leveling entire towns and cities. And it's really, and it didn't just it wasn't just the summer of 1919. It lasted for several years. But it's really in a country that has a lot of very dark and sinister history that isn't openly talked about. the summer of 1919 is one of like is just a standout moment in American history, and so we talk a lot about that. How do we incorporate aspects of that into the story, and then use that to inform our characters? And because the lead family is a is a black family descendant from runaway slaves, and we were like, everything that they're dealing with should not be something that's exclusive to the black community. So as the story moves forward, we're going to meet people from other ethnicities and other religions and other races that all understand the threat, but from within the context of their religion or their ethnicity or their race. And we start to realize, oh, there are other families of monster hunters, but they're whatever. The Irish. There's an Irish family that because if you study the history of immigration in America, like the Irish were treated like crap when they first came over, as were most Irish, Italians, Jews, all of them, in the decades past were the trash of whatever is sort of what they were considered. And they it's interesting now to talk about it, but Irish weren't considered white people. They were considered Irish, and so we're going to be playing with some of those aspects as the story progresses. But right now we're focusing primarily on one family. And at some point, provided sales are good enough and people want to see more of it, we'll definitely be moving the family further ahead into the future, into the 1950s and 60s. But we're definitely going to be going back into the past a little bit and exploring like their origins and how they got into this business of monster hunting or monster curing or whatever. We call it either purifying or amputating in the book. And we don't talk about it that much. Sanford, Chuck, and I don't talk about it that much now because people are like, what's amputating? And it's like, yeah, it's too difficult to explain right now. But you'll get it. You're either purifying the soul or you're amputating the soul. And
I cannot wait to read this book. Honestly, it sounds fantastic, and I'm very excited, and I can't wait for the sure-to-come blockbuster movie based on it.
I'd be happy with a Netflix series or something like that. You know?
Honestly, I'm going to be honest. Just listening to you talk about it, I am just so intrigued. I can't wait to read it, and like I said, I will be shocked if this does not become in the zeitgeist, because it sounds awesome.
We're pushing for it. And it's one of those books that like I just want to make sure. Sanford and Chuck and I, we talk about this a lot, and I just keep saying we have to make a book that's as different than anything else that's out there, but is as good as the best things that are out there. And so, and this is, I have to be very clear because I'm as good a writer as either of these two writers, but the two books that I look to the most right now for my inspiration creatively are Bitch Planet and Saga, are the two that I look to the most, because I feel like they're giving me as a reader more of the, I've never seen this before. And so that's what I'm pushing for with Bitterroot. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, I think you are, as I said, I think you are really one of the best writers right now, and I'm very excited about this series. So, and that is everything I wanted to talk to you about. Phil, do you have anything? Would you like to waste this man's time, or?
Yeah, you didn't even let him get a word in.
I'm sorry.
What do you got, Phil?
That's the way it goes. Yeah. No, I was going to ask that Fireheart question about the Fireheart cousins, and you answered that. I'm like, this man doesn't pull out these obscure characters and knows his Marvel history, and not throw out the name Fireheart, not make it make them related to Thomas Fireheart. But
yeah.
But no, I just wanted to say I've been enjoying Luke Cage, and I don't know if it's just the time he started it, or if. You are a brilliant writer. It seems like everyone else, once Marvel Legacy hits, okay, now we're going to throw the classic stuff in. From issue 1, you've been dealing with the classic Luke Cage stuff, like, the Doctor gave him his powers and some of the other people who got those powers. And it's just a great book, and I think I'm reading between the lines. You said you needed to get Tilda Johnson in the suit. Are we getting Tilda Johnson and Luke Cage? Because she's going to be in the show.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. It's you know, I'm working on my second story arc right now, and I haven't figured out quite. There's no room for Tilda in the second story arc. I mean, I'm almost done writing it, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what's going to happen with the third story arc yet. You know, there's Marvel will tell you a bunch of things, and then there'll be that like one little thing they don't tell you about, which, you know, like Secret Empire was that one thing that like, oh, well, what the hell's a Secret Empire thing, you know? um, and you know, sometimes they tell you everything, and sometimes they tell you little bits, and it feels a lot like it's a need to know sort of thing. And so, you know, I would definitely like to bring Tilda back, but you know, who knows? Honestly, I'm not sure what we're going to do yet. We haven't talked enough about the third story arc. Um, and I'm sure that they're making decisions on a million other things, you know, and as long as Luke is tied into the Defenders comic, and that's one of the discussions we've been having, because he's, you know, for me, it's like he's too far out of the loop in his book right now. I was cool with it in the beginning, but I feel like now it's like, okay, you know, he's a strong presence in Defenders. He's a strong presence in the Jessica Jones book, and it's like, and in my book, he's removed from all that, and I want to get him back into that fold. So, you know, that's some of what we're discussing right now, and it'll be, you know, we're talking about comics that won't be out until like, you know, February or March, and it's always weird because it's like you're living in a weird existence where time does not exist the way it does in the rest of the world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what happens, and I still keep pushing them to let me do a Tilda, like, you know, I love miniseries. I'm told that retailers don't like them that much, and that the fans would just rather pick up the trade paperbacks, and I'm like, all right, so let's just do a Tilda. It'll be a digital comic like that Iron Fist, Immortal Iron Fist comics is right now, and then if sales are enough, we could do it as a trade. But yeah, you know, I find myself fighting for the underdog characters, and it's, you know, a lot of it's determined on what the readers want, you know, and not even what the readers want, what the retailers want to order, because that's at the end of the day the determines the success or failure of a book.
All right, we keep saying we're going to let you go, but one final question. I'm always interested about this stuff. So if you want to get Luke back into the, you know, everything, is there like a conference call or a sit down with Brian Michael Bendis, and like everyone has to plot out, okay, well, I'm going to have Luke here, so you can do this, you can do that, you know, I'll do this, you do that.
No, it's you know, like, I mean, Brian's one of my best friends, and I mean, I was just hanging out with him. We teach together. We teach a writing class at Portland State University. So, you know, he's been the most supportive of anybody, and he's like, you know, I love what you're doing. Keep it up. Um, and he's never told me, you know, oh, you know, you shouldn't do this or you can't do this. You know, editorially, there's all kinds of stuff that you'll hear. And again, I don't question it that much, because it's like, okay, this is a memo coming from somewhere. You know, maybe it's either coming from
Mm-hmm.
Disney or it's coming from Netflix, and you just sort of go with it. But you know, like I've known Brian for 17, 18 years or something like that, and when we met, he didn't even know that I was in comics. I was still working in journalism at the time, and he just, you know, we bonded over our love of movies. That's, you know, we were introduced by a mutual friend, and all we did was talk about movies for the most part. We hardly ever talked about comics. And then I would start talking a little bit more about comics, and he was like, "Oh, you're a comic nerd," and I was like, "Yeah." And then one day, I mean, we'd been friends for I don't know how many years, when it kind of came out. You know, like I said, I'd been working in a newspaper for a long time, and was getting antsy and was thinking about a career move, and you know, and he said to me, "Well, what's the one thing you would really love to do?" And I was like, you know, I'd like to take a stab at comics again. And he was like, again, what are you talking about? And then it sort of became like, you have no choice. It was Brian and of all people, believe it or not, Will Eisner, who got me, who really pushed me towards going back into pursuing comics, which is something that I had been doing right out of high school, and then gave up in my early 20s. And I'd met Will Eisner 2000 or 2001. I was interviewing him for the newspaper I was working for, and they ended up they were like, who's this Will Eisner guy? I'd set up the interview on my own, but after the course of the interview, Eisner said to me, wow, this is one of the best interviews I've ever done. He's like, you know a lot about comics. And I said, yeah, I wanted to get into comics and da-da-da-da. And he was like, well, why didn't you? And I said, oh, life just took me on another path. And he said, well, it's never too late. And I was probably about 34 at the time. And I said, yeah, I'm probably too old to pursue a career in comics. And then he just looked at me and he was like, really? You're too old, and he was well into his 80s at that point. And he was like, if this is something you want to do, you've got to do it. And that was sort of the beginning for me, the beginning of like, oh crap, and then probably about 4 or 5 years later, Brian kind of was like, you got to do this. And so that's where I am right now, and like I said, we were just having dinner last night and talking about some stuff, and we talk about all kinds of things too. He's been super supportive of everything. And, meanwhile, I'm just, having a ball hanging out with him and his kids and his wife. And yeah, so it's all good. But he's never said, I joke sometimes and go, oh, well, we can't do anything unless Brian approves it. But that's not the case at all. He is so supportive of everybody. And he's just really like one of those guys who knows comics, and he knows storytelling really well, which is, why he teaches and I teach, and he's a way better teacher than I am. He, when our students are talking about, when they're developing their stories for class, he just comes up with these amazing ideas, and they're not his ideas so much as they're questions that he asks our students, like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Which is what any good writer or good editor does when you're bouncing ideas off of them.
I love when I hear that these people that you read their work and love that they're supportive and great people. And next time you talk to him, tell him he's on our list to talk to also. But
yeah,
I'm just happy
he can be
I'm
bad
not too old
about
to get into
responding
writing
to
comic books.
correspondence. What's that?
Oh
now?
yeah, well I just.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just happy to hear I'm not too old to get to break into writing comics.
Yeah, I was gonna
give it
say,
a shot.
I know Brian probably gets bombarded with requests to talk, and he's writing what like 50 books now.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. So,
all right, well, Charlie, unless you have something else.
No, just it lived up in every way to what I dreamed this day would be, and so I'm very thankful for you, Mr. Walker, for coming on and being nerding with us, because that's what Superconnectivity is all about, just hanging out and nerding, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
And please, the door's always open. You're a friend of the show now. Anytime you want to come on, just chat or promote something, or even if you can't make it, just shoot me. You have my email. Just shoot me an email. Be like, hey, can you mention this is coming out, or I'm going to be appearing at this con, and and everyone, I think it's this Wednesday, September 20th, Luke Cage issue 5 comes out. I'm pretty sure it's on my list.
Yep, I do believe it's this week. I know War for the Planet of the Apes came out last week, and Luke Cage is. I think it's this week. I lose track of this stuff because I'm in my brain. I'm already in October, just dealing with nonsense post New York Comic Con, which is intimidatingly close by. So,
great. And anything else you want to tell people about, or social media? Anything?
No, I mean, I'm writing a book for Lion Forge called Superb. It's not that easy to find at retailers, but it is on Comixology. And I would say that keep your eyes and ears open during New York Comic Con, because there's a big announcement coming there. We just announced, Chuck and I just announced Bitter Root at Rose City Comic Con last weekend, and then next month in New York there's going to be a big announcement that I can't wait to get off my chest. It's carrying these secrets around is too much. So, but there's a super cool project that's going to be announced that I think debuts in January, which honestly is the ultimate childhood dream come true. So I'll leave it at that.
Very good. And by the way, I love Superb. I picked up issue 2. Very good book.
Oh, thank you. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll let you guys go. I'm going to get back to work now, because otherwise there'll be someone screaming at me come Monday that my deadlines haven't been met. So.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Yep.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Take care.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Charlie.
Okay.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Yeah, that was great. Like I said, that lived up, and I was right about the Revolutor. Go back,
See?
listen to the old shows. I was calling that, man. And he knew what if issue I was talking about, so that was great. I like I said, this lived up in every way to what I hoped it would be. I hope he just doesn't think I'm an idiot now. I know he's gonna say, "Oh man," gonna call Michael and says, "Oh no, this Phil guy, he was cool, but this other nerd, oh god, he was annoying." But it was great, and hopefully he doesn't unfriend me on Facebook, because we are technically Facebook friends. At least on one of his accounts, you know. Okay. Anything else to talk about tonight, Phil, or we're going to call that a great set of super connections?
I think that was a great episode for number 150.
Yes, it was. Number 150. Ask for it by name. Okay. Phil, if people would like to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Well, if you want to do an interview, like David F. Walker just did, I mean, hey, maybe we get, like I was saying, maybe we get bend this for 200. I don't know, but email me nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am at nightwingpdp, and you can always get a hold of us for anything Capes and Lunatics, capesandlunatics@gmail.com, and our voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38 Capes, and we're all over Facebook and Twitter at Capes Lunatics.
Awesome. And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our Moz and Paws once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet The Inhumans and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Gotham and maybe even Legends of Tomorrow. Who knows? Who knows how crazy I'll feel at that time. That's CHARLIEESSER. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Thank you for connecting with us, ladies and gentlemen. Please super connect with us again next week. Good night.
All right, 10 seconds. Once again, thank you, David F. Walker. You're a man among men. Thank you so much. Good night.